way to my cousin's house right now. It's about 2 hours away, and when I get there, I'm gonna film a video for you guys, and I hope you guys like it. Bye! See you in like 2 hours. Guys, what's up? It's me, Crystal. I hope you're all having a wonderful, amazing day, and if you're not, there's always tomorrow. Or is there? So today, I want to talk about one of my absolutely favorite chapters in the Bible. It's Genesis 32. This story is amazing, and if you guys haven't read it before, go ahead and pull out your Bibles right now and go ahead and read it so that you know what I'm talking about. Let's get started. So I don't know how many of you have read the story of Jacob, but basically he ended up leaving his home and going somewhere else and seeing this beautiful girl. I believe her name was Rebecca. I hope I'm not wrong because that would totally suck. Don't kill me. But yeah, so he ended up leaving his home and going and seeing this beautiful girl, and he just fell madly in love. So he goes and talks to her father named Laban and is like, oh, hey, I want to marry your daughter. And Laban's like, he's like, so hey, why don't you go ahead and work for me for like 7 years, and then you could go ahead and marry her. And of course Jacob's like, oh yeah, okay, that's all I have to do. He was so in love with her that he was willing to like go out and do absolutely anything. So he ended up working for Laban for 7 years, and then Laban, is that how you say his name? Laban? I don't know, but that's how I'm going to pronounce it. So he ended up working for him for 7 years in hopes of getting to marry his daughter. So after the 7 years, he's like, hey, you promised me that I was going to get to marry your daughter. And Laban was like, oh yeah, okay. But Laban ended up deceiving him and actually giving Jacob her older sister, because I guess it was like some sort of tradition that the younger one can't get married before the older one, and it ended up being her older sister. And he was like, what the heck? And Laban was like, oh, I'm sorry. There's a dog barking. Why is there a dog barking? So Laban was like, hey, so if you work for me for another 7 years, you can go ahead and marry the one you want to marry. And Jacob, being still so in love, he was like, okay. And then he ended up marrying her. But then after that, he still stuck around for a while. He was still just, he was stuck there, and it sucked. But actually, God ended up, getting him out of there. And God was like, I'll protect you. Go ahead, go back to your home, get out of there. And God brought him out of that. So Jacob's leaving, and God actually sent some of his angels to Jacob to camp near him. And I just thought that was so crazy, because I'm like, dude, like how crazy it is to be like surrounded by angels, to actually like be able to feel them, to be able to see them. And God sent them to Jacob, in order to protect him as he was going back home. And another point that I want to make is that Jacob's over here thinking like, oh my gosh, God, he sent his angels to me, they're here right now. But what he didn't realize is that the angels had been there all along. Some of us, we don't realize God's protection over our life. We don't realize that we're favored by God. And Jacob wasn't able to notice them before. He wasn't able to see them. But think of his father-in-law Laban as like worldly. He was full of like bargaining and bartering, and he just wanted Jacob to stay stuck, and he like ended up tricking him into working for him for like 14 years. And Jacob, he still stayed there, and he was just stuck with Laban. But then when he finally got away from all that stuff that he was surrounded by, all that worldly stuff, he was finally able to see the angels that were surrounding him. So let me go ahead and ask you guys a very serious question. How many of you are wondering, where God is in your life? You're like, God, I don't feel you. I'm praying, but are you even there? Are you even listening to me, God? Like, how many of you guys feel like that? But let me go ahead and ask you another question. What are you guys doing to get closer to God? Or more importantly, what are you not doing? A lot of us wonder, where's God? Where is he when I need him? Why can't I feel him? Maybe it's because you're surrounded by all this chaos. Maybe it's because you're surrounded by things that you shouldn't be surrounded by. Maybe it's because you're still in that situation that you should have been out of years ago. Maybe that's why you don't feel God. Maybe it's because you don't read enough Bible. Maybe it's because you don't go to church enough. Maybe it's because you're not doing anything in order to get closer to him. You're just asking and asking and asking and asking. I want you guys to really think about that. A lot of us are like Jacob. He got stuck. with his father-in-law for so many years, and he didn't need to be in that situation, but he was, and God brought him out, and God can do that for you also. A lot of the times we don't realize just how much God is protecting us, just how much he's done for us. There's actually a story that has stuck with me for my whole life. I don't remember how old I was when I heard it, but I know I was really young, and it's something that has stuck with me forever. And I don't know exactly how it goes, but I kind of remember the gist of it. Okay, so there was this girl. She was on her way home. It was the middle of the night, and she realizes that there's this alleyway that could be a shortcut. And so she's thinking to herself, do I go the long way and have to be out here like in the middle of the night longer? Or do I just try to, run as fast as I can through the shortcut, which is an alleyway, which is pretty scary. And you know what? Anyway, so she decides to go through the alley. As she's walking through the alley, it's really dark and it's really scary, and she sees this man who's staring at her, and he looks super creepy. And so she's just with her head down and trying to walk like as fast as she can, and this man is just like hecka staring her down. Okay, so she ends up actually getting home, and she goes to sleep and everything. She wakes up the next morning, turns on the TV, and is listening to the news, and she ends up hearing about this girl who got raped and murdered in the same alley that she was walking down, only 2 hours after she was walking through it. And she's like, oh my gosh, like that could have been me. And so the police, they end up asking if there were like any witnesses, because they think they know who this guy is, who did it, but they're unsure. So this girl ends up going to the police station, to look at like all the suspects that they have, to see if she picks the one that they suspect. And she sees him, she sees that same man there who she saw in the alley, who was staring her down. And she's like, that's him. She ends up actually asking the police, hey, can I go talk to him? And so they let her. So she goes and she talks to him, and she's like, I was in that alley that night. Why didn't you kill me? And he's like, because there were two big guys surrounding you. These two big guys on each side of her. She was completely mind blown at that point, because as she was walking through that alleyway that night, she thought she was alone. And a lot of us think that we're alone. A lot of us don't realize that we're actually under God's protection. That we're actually favored by God. If we just give ourselves to him, you guys, he assigns angels to protect everybody. He watches over you, and when you think that you're alone, like that girl thought she was alone that night, she wasn't alone, and it ended up saving her life. God can save your life from whatever situation that you're in. God can save you. Back to the story of Jacob. So he's on his way back home. God sent him, told him that he would protect him, had angels camped out. Jacob knew that he wasn't alone, but he was still kind of afraid. So there's something that happened in Jacob's past. I don't know if you know the story of Jacob and Esau. So basically, long story short, Jacob stole Esau's birthright and his blessing. Esau's the oldest. He was supposed to get it. Jacob ended up stealing it. Esau swore if Jacob ever came back home, he would kill him. So now God's sending Jacob back home, and Jacob's scared. He's scared. So as he's on his way home, he sends messengers up ahead to go talk to his brothers Esau. And they end up coming back, and they're like, hey, so Esau's coming to meet you, and he has 400 men. So Jacob completely he panicked, and he's like, oh my God, Esau's not over it. He still wants me dead. He still wants to kill me. So Jacob took matters into his own hands. He ends up dividing his family into two. He's like, okay, you guys go up ahead and we'll stay back here. If you guys die, at least me and my family over here will survive, because we're back here and you're up there. So yeah, he took matters into his own hands. Jacob forgot what God had delivered him out of. Jacob had a lot to be grateful for. God had just delivered him from Laban's grasp. God had just sent angels to camp near him to protect him. God had promised to protect him. Yet, Jacob still wanted to take matters into his own hands because of the fear that his brother Esau was going to kill him. He panicked in fear, ended up dividing his family in two. He ended up sending his oxen, donkeys, camels, bulls. He ended up sending his messengers to take Esau that in hopes of letting Esau know that he was his servant. He even called himself his servant. He told his messengers to say, "Your servant Jacob brings you all this stuff." He was surrendering everything to Esau instead of surrendering his whole self to God. He just surrendered his whole self to something else. He panicked. In panic and fear, even though God had just sent him freaking angels, you guys. He thought that he would do things his own way, like many of us, like me. There's been so many times where I tried to deal with my own situation. I tried to deal with things the way that I wanted to, instead of the way that God wanted me to. I decided that instead of remembering everything that God brought me out of, that I would just go ahead and panic and think that I could just do whatever I wanted. And I know a lot of you do the same thing. You think that you have to handle your burdens on your own. You think that you have to do everything your own way. But you don't, you guys. You don't have to do things your own way. There's actually a quote that's always been my favorite. It's super simple, but it goes like this: "You have overcome 100% of your battles." Think about it, guys. Think about it. You're watching this video right now. If you are watching this video right now, you're an overcomer. God has brought you out of your oppression, just like he did with Jacob. And Jacob forgot that, the same way that we do today. God delivered you from addiction. God delivered you from suicidal thoughts. God delivered you from your parents hating you. God delivered you from you thinking that you were going to amount to nothing. God delivered you from whatever situation it is. God delivered you. And somewhere along the line, you forgot that just because another problem came along. You guys, life is always going to have problems. There's always going to be things that are going to come up trying to tear you down. The devil is constantly trying to steal, kill, and deceive. It is written in the Bible. The devil wants you to fail, but he can't win. He can't win if you fill yourself up with God and you remember what he brought you out of. I don't care if you're all sad right now, I care that you're all sad, but don't let that bring you down. You have to remember what you've overcame. You have to remember what God brought you out of and that he's going to do it again. Don't be like Jacob. Don't try to handle things your own way. Don't try to go down your own path. Don't try to do things and carry your burdens on your own. Let God carry that weight for you and trust him, because he will not let you down. Another point that I want to make is that Jacob panicked because of something that happened in his past, because of his past sins. I believe that his problem with Esau was 20 years before this. It happened 20 years before God had brought him back home. He was still afraid because of something that happened in the past. He was still letting something that God had already forgiven him for bring him down. Everybody makes mistakes, you guys. Everybody has something from their past that they're not proud of. But you can't let that tear you down. You can't let that scare you and then you try to go off and do things your own way without God. You're already forgiven, you guys. Whatever you did in the past, whatever thing that you're not proud of, God already forgave you for it. Don't let it define your life. Don't let it make you do more things that you'll regret. Don't let it take you in a different direction that God has for you, because God knows the plan that he has for you. It's written in Jeremiah 29:11. It says, for I know the plans I have for you, plans to prosper you, plans to give you hope and a future, plans, of peace and not of fear. Don't let your past sins do to you what they did to Jacob. As we come to the end of this verse, it actually talks about how Jacob wrestles with a man. He wrestles all through the night, so determined to win. But this man wasn't just any man. It was actually God. He was wrestling with God, just like most of us do today. We're constantly wrestling with what God wants for our life. There's been so many times where God has been pulling me towards, He wants me to go down the straight path, and then I just end up going to the right or to the left. And we're so determined to do things our own way that we're wrestling just like Jacob. It says that he wrestled until daybreak. He wrestled all through the night until the sun came up. Imagine how determined he must have been to win, to be fighting with God all through the night. He was so determined to do things his own way that he wrestled with God all through the night. God was actually asking me to do something for maybe like over a year. He was asking me to start my young adults group, and I was just like, no, God, I don't have time. No, God, I can't do this. God, what if I fail? What if I don't make it? It was just all of these excuses, excuse after excuse after excuse, and then I finally gave in. You wonder why you're so exhausted. Why you're so exhausted with life, why you're so exhausted after a long day, why you're so exhausted. It's because you're trying to handle everything on your own when you don't have to. God already carried the cross for you. He already took all of the pain for you. You don't have to do it on your own. Don't be like Jacob. Don't wrestle with God. I want you guys to understand that the only right path is the path that God has for you. Jacob was so determined to win. He actually thought that he could win. He actually thought that he could prevail over God. And I think sometimes we think that God's will won't stand, but it stands, you guys. I didn't think I would be here making YouTube videos. I didn't think I would be starting my young adults group next week. I didn't think that I would still be here after everything that I've been through, but God had another plan for my life. He had something more out there for me, and I'm standing here right now telling you guys, don't wrestle with God. Alright guys, that's all I have for you today. I hope you guys were able to get something from this, and I hope that it spoke to your life in a way that allows you to grow in your relationship with God. And if you've liked this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe down below. If you want to, I hope you guys have a wonderful day and a good rest of the week. Bye! Aren't those two dogs so cute back there? Just look at them. They're cousins. That one is Coco and that one's Mackenzie.